back. Welcome. Another Tuesday night. Just want to give a quick shout out to my boy Juice for making me a millionaire. He just showed me that in South Carolina it is legal to use the Bodunva, whatever the fuck. Let's see how you pronounce it, because I read it and I was like, oh, that's easy. Bovada. The Bovada app, where apparently we can bet on sports in our state. That's fucking awesome. We're going to jump right into UFC Vegas 64, though. Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Lemos. Lemos plus 180. 12-2-1 professional record with 7 wins by knockout and 3 by submission. Lemos is 6-2 in the UFC. She lost her debut by TKO to Leslie Smith, and then she got submitted by Jessica Andrade in April. And then since that loss to Andrade, she has a submission win over Michelle Waterson in July. Her UFC wins include Waterson, Angela Hill, Montserrat Ruiz, and Miranda Granger. She's coming into this fight 2 inches shorter, but the same reach as Marina Rodriguez, who predominantly a striker. 16-1-2 is her professional record. 6 wins via knockout, 9 by decision. She's never been finished in her pro career. Her only loss was a split decision loss to Carla Esparza in 2020. She's currently on a 4-fight losing streak following that loss, beating Amanda Ribas, Michelle Waterson, and Zhang Yanan. It's got to be a 4th there, but guess I didn't write it. Started a UFC career 2-1-2 prior to her 4-fight winning streak. And then her fight will be determined by, I think this fight will be determined by grappling. So Rodriguez probably going to be more proficient on the ground as far as, I think she's like a purple belt or a brown belt in jiu-jitsu or something like that. So I think she's got a little bit better of grappling than Lemos does. I think the question is going to be, can she get it to the ground? Plus 180, mentioning Bovada a little bit, plus 180, this is a fight that, if I wasn't completely against putting large amounts of money down for UFC fights just because they can go either way, Amanda Lemos at plus 180 is good money in my opinion. I'm going to pick her just to win, but Amanda Lemos would be pretty good money as an underdog there. Neil Magny versus Daniel Rodriguez, co-main event. Magny's coming off a submission loss to Shavkat Rakhmonov in his last fight back in June. Excuse me, he's 26-9. 16-2 by decision. Has been submitted in 5 out of 9 of his losses. He's been in the UFC since 2013, 19-8 with the company. UFC wins over Max Griffin, Jeff Neal, Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit, Kelvin Gastelum, and Li Jingliang. He's a very well-rounded fighter, master of none, I'd say. He's got dominant wrestling, but he got out-grappled by guys like Rakhmonov and Michael Chiesa and Rafael dos Anjos. He's significantly improved his striking over his last few fights, but he was knocked out by both Santiago Ponzinibbio and Lorenz Larkin, who non-champions, non-number 1 contenders, guys that haven't been established in any way in the UFC. Same thing for the grappling losses. He's got Rakhmonov, not established yet. Mike Chiesa had been back and forth his entire UFC career, and then Rafael dos Anjos was a champion at one point, but at the time that he fought Neil Magny, afterthought, not even close to the belt or anything like that. So I'm not saying this to dog on him. I think Daniel Rodriguez has got a good chance in this fight based off the striking. Rodriguez is 17-2, never been finished. One of his losses prior to the UFC was a split decision loss against Victor Henya. His second professional loss was a unanimous decision loss to Nicholas Dalby at UFC 255 in 2020. He started his professional career in 2015, which means he started his professional career 2 years after Neil Magny joined the UFC. He's been in the UFC since 2020, so 7 years after Neil Magny came to the company. Since joining the UFC, he's 7-1, currently on a 4-fight winning streak. 8 wins via knockout, 4 wins via submission. His UFC wins include Li Jingliang, Kevin Lee, Preston Parsons, Mike Perry, and Tim Means. He is 1-1 as a professional boxer with both fights happening in 2015. And this is where I think Magny's got some room to say that he might win this fight. It's because Neil Magny, first of all, 16-2 by decision. This guy, Daniel Rodriguez, doesn't get finished. So both of his losses in his career by decision. Second of all, Rodriguez normally uses his length in fights. He usually keeps fighters at the end of his kicks, at the end of his punches, and that keeps them shooting and trying to reach in and makes it able so that Daniel Rodriguez can land big power shots and put you out. Neil Magny, 3-inch height, 6-inch reach advantage over Daniel Rodriguez is going to be the complete opposite. He's going to be the one keeping Rodriguez at the end of his strikes. He's going to be the one that, if he wants to grapple, it's going to be easier for him to get to his body and get to a clinch and do these types of things. With that being said, Neil Magny, and this is just straight off of picking. When I pick based off emotion, bias, facts, all that. So this one's going to be emotion, because every time I've bet with Neil Magny, he has lost. Every time I don't bet with him, he has won. I kind of want to see Neil Magny do something with the end of his career. I like Daniel Rodriguez. I'm sorry I got to pick you, buddy, but I'm going to go Daniel Rodriguez via knockout. If it happens, I'm going to claim I picked that because Neil Magny's an older guy. He's getting to the latter part of his career, and his chin's starting to go. If he wins, I'm going to chalk it up to when I don't pick this guy, he wins, and when I pick him, he loses. And I'm just going to go based off of that for the rest of my fucking life. Maximum Gresham versus Jailton Almeida. Almeida minus 660 favorite. Again, if you're really into the betting aspect of mixed martial arts, this will be a cool fight to bet on. Gresham is 2-0 as a professional kickboxer, 31-9-2 as a professional mixed martial artist, whereas his opponent, Jailton Almeida, is 17-2 as a professional. So 19 professional fights for Almeida and 42 professional fights for Max Gresham. Gresham has 16 wins via knockout, 10 wins via decision, 2-2 in the UFC, winning his last fight via decision over William Knight in February. He's at 2 UFC losses, include decision losses to Dustin Jacoby and Marcin Tybura. Dustin Jacoby, long, lanky kickboxer. Marcin Tybura, dangerous anywhere. Prior to getting into the UFC, Maxim Gresham had to fight guys like Alexander Volkov, Magomed Ankalaev, Raheem Cleveland, Jordan Johnson. I mean, those 2 fights he fought in the PFL, so I mean, those are expected. He's in the PFL. But to fight guys like Alexander Volkov and Magomed Ankalaev prior to getting into any type of big organization, fighting those guys on the regional scene, this guy has experience. This guy has the highest level of experience at that. And he's also a master of sport and Army hand-to-hand combat, which doesn't do you much good in MMA fights. I'd have to say it just gives you an edge as far as you get into those extremity, the Kimura locks, the key locks, the knee locks, the things like that. Those are all going to be hand-to-hand combat's going to give him an advantage over that. I just don't see the fight going to the ground at all. Jailton Almeida 3-0 in the UFC, won his contract on the Contender Series 2021. Since then, knocked out Danilo Marquez, submitted Parker Porter, and then also submitted Anton Turkovly in September of last year. He's got a 100% finish rate in 17 fights, 6 wins via knockout, 11 wins via submission. Powerful strikes, crazy athleticism, great grappling for that weight class. I think the question becomes, does he use it against Gresham? I'm not sure, man. Both of these guys, really, really good strikers. I'm not sure the fight ever gets to the ground. They're pretty much the same size. Doing a catch weight fight at 220. It's a really tough one for me. It's a tough one to decide. I think it's minus 660 because if Almeida gets this fight to the ground, he's pretty much locked it in. It's pretty much locked in that he's going to win the fight. So I think that's kind of what they're going off of. But every fight starts standing, and Maxim Gresham is a dangerous guy to start striking against. I am going to go Jailton Almeida. I do think he has a really, really bright future in the UFC. It's why I'm picking him. But minus 660 is just absurd to me for that fight. Fourth fight, this one's going to be on the prelims. Oh, just wasted my time too, guys, by the way. I completely forgot. Yesterday, at the end of the day, I wrote my notes around 12. At like 6, 7 o'clock at night, they canceled that fight. So maybe 2 or 3 minutes I just took broken down that fight. It was a complete waste of time because that fight is canceled and not happening this weekend. So scratch that. We're going to move on to Mark Madsen versus Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson, brown belt in jiu-jitsu. Mark Madsen, 7-time silver medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling, and he won gold in 2004. He is 12-0 as a mixed martial artist, 6 wins via decision, 3 wins via knockout, 3 wins via submission. 4-0 in his time with the UFC. getting a TKO win over Danilo Bellandaro, and then winning decisions over Austin Hubbard, Clay Guida, and Vince Pichel, which is really good because you get to see him beat strikers like Vince Pichel and Danilo Bellandaro, and then beat a wrestler and Clay Guida, and then beat a guy that's really good at jiu-jitsu like Austin Hubbard. So he kind of just shows that he can beat anybody doing what he loves to do in his Greco-Roman wrestling. He's a product of Mark Campman and their training camp out there. He's slightly smaller than Dawson coming into this fight. You've seen glimpses of his knockout power and a few of his knockout wins in his career. But what he's going to do is he's going to take you down. He's going to get on top of you. He's going to make it a long night. Grant Dawson, 18-1-1 as a pro. Only loss being a TKO loss to Hugh Pooley in 2016 prior to the UFC. He's 6-0-1 in the UFC, winning his last fight via submission over Jared Gordon. He's fought some good jiu-jitsu fighters in the UFC, but has yet to fight anybody with the wrestling skills of Marco Madsen. He's got UFC wins over Gordon, Leonardo Santos, Nad Naramandi, and Julian Erosa. Julian Erosa, long, lanky striker. Nad Naramandi and Leonardo Santos both have knockout power, but predominantly jiu-jitsu players. And then, of course, Jared Gordon, really good all around. But none of those four guys having the wrestling credentials as Mark Madsen. Dawson is a great finisher. He's got great submissions, amazing chokes. 11 out of 12 of his submission wins are via choke. 10 out of 11 of his choke wins are rear naked chokes. So if the guy gets on your back, it's probably going to be a long night. But here's or a short night, sorry. But this is where it differentiates. Marco Madsen is such a good wrestler, and wrestlers a lot of times give up their back to jiu-jitsu players because in wrestling you want to keep your back off the mat. But he's just such a good offensive wrestler that if something happens and he gets rocked or gets sat down or something like that, the quick reflexes of him to immediately shoot on a leg, it's going to be there. And he's going to be able to shoot on a leg, and he's going to be able to get in. And even if that just gets him out of trouble, he gets the cobwebs cleared, and then he shoots for a takedown and gets it, he's going to get you to the mat. He's going to ride out a decision. He's coming in at plus 195. Matter of fact, that might be my first bet. That might be my very first bet on Bovota, whatever the fuck you say that name of that bullshit. That might be my first bet because Marco Madsen's wrestling is way on a different type of level than anything Grant Dawson has ever fought in his career. I understand Grant Dawson has a little bit more experience, 8 more professional fights than Marco Madsen. Marco Madsen has got, we're talking decade of Olympic Greco-Roman wrestling experience. And then he's taking that into his 12-0 mixed martial arts career. So insane how the odds are swayed that way for Grant Dawson. I'm 100% going Marco Madsen. And let me just touch really quick before we get into the prelims. I want to just explain a little bit why I don't like betting on MMA. We've seen Dustin Jacoby fight Khalil Roundtree last week. Khalil Roundtree won that fight. Dustin Jacoby, at the end of the fight, yes, round by round is how the fight is scored. But at the end of the fight, outscored Khalil Roundtree by 60 significant strikes. A significant strike is something defined by a strike that lands, that you can see from the crowd, from the TV, anywhere in the building, you can see it landed. It's not a knockout punch. It doesn't have anything to do with power. It's got to do with landing clean on your opponent. He had 60 more of those than Khalil Roundtree. I don't care if Khalil Roundtree beat the shit out of Dustin Jacoby. They gave him 2 rounds. They gave him round 1 and 3. I don't care if he beat the shit out of Dustin Jacoby. They say they gave him the rounds because he hurt him in the first round. He hurt him in the third round. This is not boxing. You don't get a 10-9 round for a knockdown. It is bullshit. And if you got outstruck by 60 strikes, there's no way, even if it happened in 1 round, if you got outstruck by 60 strikes in 1 round, that's a 10-8. That is a 10-8. So if Dustin Jacoby got beat in round 1 and 3 and then outstruck Khalil Roundtree by 60 strikes in round 2, that's a 10-8 in round 2. And if he didn't happen, and if he just outstruck him by 20 in the first, outstruck him by 30 in the second, outstruck him by 10 in the third, then you cannot give him the first and the third based off hurting him, because if you got outstruck by 20, 10, 15, 20, 30 strikes, what is the judging criteria? The judging criteria goes significant strikes, grappling, control time, knockdowns. or significant strikes, knockdown, or knockdown, significant strikes, control time. But either way, one knockdown should not overrule 20 to 30 significant strikes. There should be some sort of hierarchy there. Just like there's some sort of hierarchy where if I outstrike you by 20 strikes, but you take me down once, my 20 strikes means more than the one takedown. Now, if I outstrike you by 20 and you take me down 6 times, now we're talking about it gets a little closer. But 20 outstrikes to 1 takedown, there's no fucking question. 1 knockdown versus 20 more significant strikes, there's not a fucking question. I understand he's not hurting Khalil with these fights, but with these strikes, but this is exactly what we talked about last week, that a kickboxing style has less power than the Muay Thai style. So he's going to land more power, which means he's probably going to hurt Jacoby more. But if Jacoby could put more volume out, what do you want him to do? How does he win the fight? That's how he wins. Got robbed, 100% blatant robbery. I don't care that people argue, well, he got knocked down in those 2 rounds, so there's an argument there. There's no argument there. If the argument was he got knocked down 2, 3, 4 times, he looked like he was close to being finished, I hear you. Now we're in an argument. But if he got knocked down once, and the finish wasn't close, but he got knocked down, he got rocked 1 time in 2 separate rounds, that doesn't mean you won the round. Anyway, getting away from it. Khalil Roundtree lost that fight, and I would have bet on Dustin Jacoby if I was a betting man for that fight, and I feel like I would have got robbed. And you know, if something happens with the NFL and they come out after the game and they say, hey man, you know, we got it wrong, they shouldn't have won that game, they take the win away or whatever they do, I'm sure you bet on that game and they took the win away from you, I'm sure they give you the money back for the winnings. This, a robbery? No. Doesn't matter. 5, 10 years down the road, they get this thing overturned to a no contest, you're not getting your fucking money back. So it's stupid. Tahir Ulanbekov will be fighting Nate Maness. That one's probably going to be happening on the main card. They're probably going to throw another one on the main card. If I had to pick which one it's going to be, I'd have to go heavyweights, Josh Parisian versus Chase Sherman, with the Almeida fight falling off. The rest of the prelims are Shailen Nurnbiki versus Derek Meaner. Poliana Viana will be going up against Jinyu Fry. Tamir's Vidal going up against Ramon Pascal. Benito Lopez fighting Mario Batista. Johnny Munoz Jr. will be going up against Ludwig Shalanan. Miranda Maverick going up against Shayna Young. And then finally, Jake Hadley finally coming back to the UFC. Everybody's been wanting to see him get his ass beat, going up against Carlos Candelero. So that's your picks this week. Come back next Tuesday. We'll have more NFL and UFC content. Until next time, stay barbecued. You guys know what the fuck it is, right?